Hi, my name is Andy Ashcraft. And you're probably all wondering exactly, well, who's that? It's an excellent question. I got my start with D&D. I'm very happy, by the way, to have heard the words D&D spoken more today than I have heard in any game design conference in the last 6 years. It's been awesome. That led directly into me running LARPs for UCLA Science Fiction Club, which then led to my first job as a game designer at 3DO, which led to my first published title, Muppet Treasure Island, which then led to more work in the CD-ROM days, Return to Krondor, and then Dreamcast, Fliggin Brothers, and then the PlayStations 2 and 3, Wars of the Monsters, Warhawk. I did a little work on God of War 2, and then on to Wii and Nintendo DS. And then most recently, I've been working as a freelance game designer on iOS games. So I've been working with Disney on Tron and the AppMates game with the little toy cars, which was awesome. And the inspiration for this talk was an analysis of Tiny Monsters versus DragonVale. And I started playing Tiny Monsters first. It was the one that attracted my attention to it. I like the monster designs better. I like the cute little animations better. And yet, DragonVale got me to spend $9.99. So something was going on, and I'm not entirely sure what it was. I did a lot of thinking about this and a lot of talking about this with other game designers. And I should say that this talk is not about monetization. It's not about social mechanics. It's not about art direction. All of these things probably add to why DragonVale is doing so much better than Tiny Monsters when they're essentially the same game. I'm not even going to talk about copying or cloning because honestly, Fred said the best thing about that earlier today at all. So there's something else going on, right? There's something else going on about DragonVale and about the way that they're handling things. So I have a theory. In DragonVale, you breed some dragons, you grow some food, you make some gold, and then you breed specific dragons. So over the course of the game, the focus of the game changes. That is, the thing that you're doing, the thing that's hard for you to do, changes as the game progresses. So my epiphany is just this. We can make awesome, sticky, enormously compelling games by allowing what the game is about to change and evolve over time. So I'm going to let this slide sit up there for a little bit. I'm working in my copious spare time on a sit-down superhero role-playing game. And I love superhero role-playing games. I've been playing Champions since I was 13 years old, and that's. But honestly, I've played so much Champions now, I just can't do it again. I cannot face making another Champions character. How many people have played Champions? All right, so you guys know what I'm talking about. It could be, I mean, literally, you could spend days making your character in this game. So I've been wanting to make another game that's like Champions, but easier, with all the same kind of control and all the same sort of like, ooh, I have this great idea for a superhero character. Let me make this kind of character. I want to give you all of that super robust creativity, but without it being a spreadsheet, without it being this enormous task. So I started this process, and I went to a friend of mine and I asked him I said, here's what I'm doing, and I was just chatting with him about it. He's been one of my gaming buddies for years, and he said, well, that's fine. Well, what's the game about? I was like, what do you mean, what's the game about? It's about superheroes. It's about comic books. It's about, it's a superhero game. What do you mean, what's the game about? No, what's the game about? All right. So he was right. I had to think about this for a long time, and I finally decided that what my superhero game is about saving people. It's saving people from disasters, it's saving people from accidents, it's saving people from super villainy. But that's what I mean when I talk about, well, what is your game about? And how does that change? So what I really want to talk about is how over the course of a game, especially a game that has some length to it, has some state that's that you're meant to play over time, not like a poker game or something where you're in and out, but even games like Angry Birds or Where's My Water can have some changes over time that allow the player to feel like they're progressing, allow the player to feel like they're mastering the game, because I think that's important. For example, all right, so D&D, you kill monsters and you get loot. The original D&D, that is, first and second editions for those of us who are ancient, you then build a keep. At some point, you stop going out and killing monsters. That's not the challenge anymore. The challenge now is you have a country, and now you have a castle to keep, and you've got population, and there's other things. It becomes a bigger game. It becomes a bigger game than just being an adventurer with a sword who goes out and kills stuff. Some other games have this kind of thing built into it, like chess. Chess, over the course of a single game session, the beginning game is very different from the end game. The challenges are different. The challenge is at the beginning of chess, you establish a position. And then in the middle of the game, you sort of jockey around until you finally get to the end of the game, and then you hunt down their king. And it's a very, very different challenge. So what I'm talking about is letting the nature of the challenges change over time, because that's what your game is about. What the player is doing, what the player is finding hard to do, what the player is invested in doing, and what that player is trying to accomplish in the game. That's what your game is about. And why is this important? Well, like I said before, I want some variety in my game, and that's fine. I want to become more skilled. I want to feel like I'm mastering this thing. I want to feel like a badass, honestly. I want to feel like I'm kicking ass at this game. But here's the really big thing, I think, and this is where I think we can do more. I want the game to tell me something cool. I want the game to tell me something either about myself or about the world, or even if it's just about the game. I want the game to tell me something interesting and cool. And that's story. Change is story. When a game changes, it means the story has changed. So here's my probably overly hashed out theory about story in games. A game is a 3-act story. In the first act, the player is weak, he has new abilities, he hasn't learned them yet, but he finds out what the ultimate challenge is. I've got to rescue Princess Peach. I've got to collect the 7 portions of the Staff of Zelda. In Act 2, which is really usually most of the game, right? In a game, most of the time, Act 1 is like the intro. And then you have 40 hours of Act 2, and then you finally get to Act 3, where you apply your mastery and you overcome that ultimate challenge. And in a traditional story structure, that Act 1, with your weak new abilities, that's the main character in like a movie or a story or whatever. That's going to be a character with some sort of character trait, problem. And then he finds out that there's some sort of big threat. And then in Act 2, he sort of gets stronger and stronger and stronger, like you do in a game. And then in Act 3, he overcomes his own personal problem in order to have the ability to overcome whatever that big threat is. So how does that work in DragonVale? Well, in DragonVale, I start off very poor, and I have some land, and I should build a dragon zoo. And then Act 2 is that I'm playing this economic game, right? I'm building up my park. I'm generating more income. I'm breeding dragons. It doesn't really matter what dragons I breed. They're all bringing me income. And at some point, it ceases to be about that because I have a ton of gold and I have a ton of food, and I don't really need to do that anymore. But I'm still hooked to this game. I'm still trying to breed the specialty dragons, the rare and the new dragons. It has changed. It has changed for me, and because it's changed, it's more sticky. And they did it. Their game is basically an economy game. But how cool would it have been if now that I'm breeding these specialty dragons, my specialty dragons can do cool new specialty things? And how, where's the next step in that? How does that game continue to evolve? So, like, what if Mario got to the point where he never needed to do another jump? What if he rescues Princess Peach, and now they're, I don't know, raising MIPS, and now it's and now you've gotten to the point where you're doing nothing but flying with the cannons and the wings or something. At some point, when you realize you haven't jumped in a while, it's like, oh, look at that, I don't need to jump anymore. It's because I've graduated past that. I've mastered that. I've moved on. What if veteran shooter players had to train the newbies? What if that became part of their game? What if their success in the game was not how well they did at killing things, but how well their charges, how well their apprentices did at killing things? And this is sort of, even more esoteric. What if you had a really cool Civil War game that at some point you won? It's a historical reenactment game. The North wins, and now the game has to do with the reconstruction of the South. How awesome would that be? How, as a tool for teaching about history, or just letting things evolve in their own way? How interesting would it be to have a game that changed in this way? So, all right, I mentioned that I've been talking about this with other game designers. This comes with a warning. There's a contract with the player, right? When you start a game that's a shooter, and your contract with the player is that they get to shoot stuff. It seems fair. You want to make sure that you satisfy this contract before you move on into other stuff, before you say, and we're done shooting things now, maybe we're going to do some other things. You want to make sure that you've at least satisfied the core contract with the player. And maybe you never take it away from them completely, but maybe the game is bigger and broader in some other way. So that's my warning about this. It's where I'm thinking about going now, and what I think that we can do with games as game designers, in a way to bring the games into an even broader audience. People who go to movies and are changed by the movies, that they go in expecting to see a certain kind of movie, and they come out and they've something unexpected has happened. They love the movie, something unexpected has happened, and they're changed by it. We have not yet done this with games. Well, maybe a couple of times, but I think Journey did that for me recently, where it really changed, and I got to the end of the game and went, oh, I see. This is actually much more interesting. How many have played Journey? Nearly everybody. Awesome. Yeah, it was inspiring to me, that game, the way that game changed, the way the game is, what the game is about, from being an exploration game to being this thing about you and your friend trying to get through it at the end, and you don't even know who these players are. That's the most awesome thing. So I have blazed through my talk, which is probably good, since I think we're running a little late. And so questions? Anybody have any questions about anything? Maybe I'll go back through my slides and look at them look at my notes. Yes, sir.
I'm listening to this. It's really interesting. I like the idea of this kind of evolution and changing the game. But throughout my history of learning about design, kind of focus on the core mechanic. The core mechanic has to be amazing, and that has to be the most solid thing. Essentially, it sounds like you're saying, let's now add a second core mechanic after you get to this certain point. And I realize you're kind of addressing that with the contract with the player, but it seems like a major risk. Like you're all of a sudden turning it into a second game.
Yes. Yes. So the question is, we've been told all day to focus on the core mechanics of the game and make the game sort of really focus in on what the game is about. And I'm suggesting maybe you take that and so, all right, we're done with that core mechanic. Let's move on to another core mechanic before the game's even over. And it's a good question. It's an excellent question. In DragonVale, the shift comes even using the same core mechanic, right? The shift has to do with the challenges. You're still breeding dragons. It's still using the same kinds of things, but what your game is about becomes different. You're right in that I am suggesting that we can probably broaden that. We can probably take that idea and broaden that. But even games like much bigger games, so social games and mobile games with very narrow mechanics where you really want to focus in, I think it's true that first off, you do want to make sure that you do focus in and get that core mechanic. But then, as you explore it, you need to allow it to evolve, I think. And I think there's a lot of ways that when we do these games, we say, oh, well, look what the player can do here. Oh, that's not what we're supposed to do. Let's not let them do that. And we can go and perhaps there's opportunity for us to go, well, keep that in there, but let's see how it evolves later. Did that answer your question? Kind of?
Pretty much. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking, it started to sound like two main, or the risk of just saying, like, why don't we just split this into two different games? And if your first game is targeting maybe a certain, like, kind of player, a certain audience in mind, how do you identify that way that you're going to evolve it and change it? It's not going to lose that initial audience, so to speak.
Right, and the way that would happen in real life is through iteration. Right, you would start with your core mechanic, and as you played it and as you iterated on it, you would realize, oh, we have an opportunity. And what I'm suggesting is instead of closing ourselves off to that and going, no, it's not the core, we actually sort of like, well, maybe there is something there. Maybe the game can evolve from the beginning, from where it really is super focused on that core mechanic, to being something that's a little broader. Or not just broader, but literally changes where you're not even doing that first thing anymore and doing the second thing, even though it's, one thing sort of grows out of the other. If it comes out of iteration where you're really just finding the fun, where you're iterating, you're like, all right, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun. Oh, this is really cool over here too. Well, it's not exactly the core thing. Okay, keep it in there. Yes, sir.
So I'm also really intrigued by this idea, and I was thinking similarly to what he was saying. It sounds like more work for me. Like I have to, okay, I just found this one cool mechanic, and I got to come up with another cool mechanic. But a question for you that I had is, I heard you saying like even DragonVale, which I personally don't really play, that later on, as you're in the later game stage, the actions you're doing are the same, maybe like the buttons that you're tapping or whatever.
Right.
But the background behind is different.
The challenge is different, right?
So could that be the solution then, that you take the same exact mechanics but change the motivation? Like if it was a shooter game and you spent the majority of the game just killing everybody, now you got to go back and just kill the guys wearing blue pants, or there's a different motivation behind what you're doing, what you're doing. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way that it would grow, right? I think that's the way that. Well, honestly, I think Portal does an excellent job of this, right? Portal gives you a game mechanic, and it's a fairly simple game mechanic, and changes the kinds of challenges that you have over time by the way that you use it. You're still opening portals and stepping through them, but at the beginning you've only got the one way, and then there's a lot of they sort of step you up through it. But in that game, I sort of feel like they have that idea, like the end game of that is where they're always meaning to go. And you kind of always know when you're playing it that you're going to get to that end game, that's what you're going to end up doing. And what I'm suggesting is that there is some creativity, there is a world of possibility from the player's perspective, starting with something that they know that they're going to get into, and then getting them to something that they by the time they're there, they absolutely want to go there, but that they didn't expect. So DragonVale got me into this that's what DragonVale did for me, is it got me to a place where I didn't expect to be. I didn't expect to be in a situation where I didn't care about the money, I didn't care about the food. All that stuff that was really important to me at the beginning of the game is no longer important to me because I've won that game. I've literally beaten that game, but I'm still playing the game, right? And I'm still potentially another $9.99 in once I run out of gems. So the longer they can keep me in, the more likely they are for me to throw down again. Yeah, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I can't help myself, but for some reason I kept thinking, how would something like this apply to, a game like Giantsdance 3 or whatever? Can you even change that sort of game?
For which kind of game? I'm sorry, I missed the...
Rock game, Giantsdance 3, where like kind of doing 50, and that kind of game, can you even change your...
Well, I think you can. I think you look at because you do want the player to get better at things. In any game, you want to build in this.
There's kind of the standard way of, all right, you're just kind of getting better at the same thing, but I think your point was you don't have to just get better at the same thing. In fact, that might lead to some boredom after a while.
That's right.
Change what you're getting better at.
Right. At some point, once you as the designers, with the game as your interface for talking to the players, once you've realized that the players are mastering a certain thing, then you can start saying, well, what else would they like to do? And what other sort of things what other things sort of suggest themselves out of the game? Because I definitely think that you should follow the fun in all of these things. So when the player starts to master something, well then, all right, that's cool. Let them go ahead and master that, but then offer them something else to do. And it might be, I don't know, these are really far-fetched, but you might be in a football game in season mode, and you've won the season, and now you've basically beaten the game. These games come out yearly, so you're waiting for the next one to come out. You're waiting for the next, 2K sports game or whatever, but there's a manager mode, or maybe there's a mode where, this is entirely far-fetched, but where you're literally training up the players for the next time. And that gets saved off, and then when you get the next game, some aspect of those stats. But there's a game there. There's some other game where that's like you're a coach. You're the coach, and you're training up the skills of the people who you hope will be in the next iteration. So it would depend game from game to game, but I just think that there's opportunity to keep people stuck to your game a little bit longer. Scott Rogers. That's right. So his comment is that there's a lot of games that give you these sort of additional challenges throughout. Like you're battling your way through a level, but there's a certain thing that you have to jump way up here to get to. You don't have the ability to jump that high until you get to the end of the game. You can come back into this early level and jump up there to get it, and that adds gameplay very inexpensively and very easily, and gives you all kinds of satisfaction for the people who play all the way through. I think those are great. I think those are awesome. What if the focus of the game, once you got to that point, what if the story lent itself to that? What if there was, you didn't realize it at the beginning of the game, but now you have to go back through and do these things? What if they're not optional? Maybe that's just like your continuation of the story. Yes, sir.
So, would you say that certain genres lend themselves more easily to this kind of mentality? So the two that pop into my mind are The Sims, where people started with building little communities and turned into the movie making game, or Team Fortress 2, which has the same mechanics but has a variety of modes that still based on the basic gameplay, but allow you to play the game in different ways. And what suggestions would you give a designer to not make them feel like separate modes of gameplay?
So the first part of the question is are there genres of game that lend themselves to this more than others? And to that I say yes, but that might just be my particular bent on what games I'm interested in. The games I tend to be interested in all seem to lend themselves to it, and then the games that I'm not particularly interested in don't. I don't know that much about sports games, so I'm trying to come up with a sports game analogy for it, and I was like, well, maybe there's a coach thing. I don't know. I don't know really enough about sports games. And the second part of your question, which is how do you keep that from feeling like a separate mode, I think has to do more with how you sort of gradually slide into it, right? So as you're mastering one thing, you're sort of introducing the other mode to the gameplay. I guess again, you have to like plan out your entire game, but once you have that plotted out, you can say, well, the pacing of the game is going to be less jumping, more negotiations. I don't know. Jumping game becomes a negotiation game? I don't know, it could. But that's the way I would do it. I would gradually ease in so there wouldn't feel like, oh, bink, and now we're in this other mode.
Do you think there's a danger, though, in the person going in thinking it's one kind of game and then at the tail end realizing it's something other? Brutal Legend comes to mind, where people thought it was a third-person action game, but it really was an RPG.
Well, that's sort of what I got to with this, is that you really need to give them that thing that they think it's going to be. And then once you have given them that, once you've given them a really satisfying experience in the way that, the experience that they expected to have based on all your marketing and all the screenshots and all the pre-publicity, then as that sort of winds down, then you can wind up this other thing in a way that's completely unexpected.
I was going to say, because this idea is kind of interesting to me, because it seems like it can be drawn in two ways, both in terms of like the player's personal goals and the actual functional goals of the game.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, kind of going to a sports analogy, I'm not a huge football player, but the goals of a game of football are very clear. But throughout a player's lifetime of playing that particular sport, they'll start off just learning to throw and catch a ball, and then they'll learn a few plays, and then 10 years down the road, they'll be a quarterback thinking about how to apply those plays strategically to a whole football team.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not like just catching and throwing a ball.
That's awesome.
Applying plays to it.
There's the solution to my football problem.
It's interesting though, because that's not changing the core mechanic of football. It's just there's so much, breadth in that design space of the core mechanic of football that
Right.
a player can carry like a whole kind of player arc experience through that one core mechanic.
That's right.
The flip side of it is that you can, I guess theoretically, you can actually design your game to switch goals to like force a player through a curve. Do you feel like that's necessary, or do you feel like it's just finding a golden core mechanic that has like that depth of chess where how does a knight move, and then 10 years later you're like, okay, I know that's board arrangement number 11,267.
Right. So the question is, do I think it's necessary to have these sort of changes, or is it really just there for the enthusiast? I guess is the way to succinctly say that.
Well, I guess do you really need to change the functional goals of the game to create this arc, or can you just create a mechanic that's deep enough that it encourages this arc naturally?
Well, for example, with the football idea, I love this idea of this sort of career mode where you're at the beginning of your career and you're really just learning. You're like, you just need to make a name for yourself, and so your individual goals are going to be pretty limited. You're like, make a touchdown, be one of the top scorers. But then as you progress and you get better and better and better, and you master these things, you get made team captain, and now your goals are make sure the rest of the team does well, and maybe it is through the same core mechanics. Maybe it's just through your playing, but maybe there's something else there too, and that's sort of what I'm getting at. Is maybe the way that the thing that as a player you say, well, what am I trying to do right now? What's the hard thing for me to do right now? If that's different at the beginning of the game than it is at the end of the game, I think that you've got more depth to the game as in total than if it's the same. If it's, I'm trying to break through this wall with a bouncing ball at the beginning of the game, and I'm trying to break through a wall with a bouncing ball 40 hours later, I might not be on for that. So that's sort of what I'm getting at. Yes, sir?
Just a comment. It's soccer rather than American football. He just described it as soccer.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm glad to know. Any other questions? Let me see what. 6:10. We've run over a little bit. Thank you all. Anne, big hand for Anne as well. I've had such a great time today. I cannot believe how awesome this has been. Thank you so much.